Well, hi out there to everyone, and it's good to see you back for another live edition of the WGSN-DB Going Solo Veterans Corner. I'm your host, of course, retired Army First Sergeant Paul Holbert, and we're going to get into our tonight's guest here in just a moment, but we want to take a moment to thank all of you for tuning in and watching the show, and for those of you who will eventually watch it if it is posted recorded later on. We'd love to have the audience, and we appreciate your participation and you joining us. Before we get started, I want to thank the sponsor of the show. Of course, we do this every week, and we're so grateful for our great sponsors that we've had and we have. Quest Fine Jewelers from Merrifield, Virginia. As I mention all the time, folks, there's always a holiday coming up. Mother's Day is on the way. Father's Day is shortly after that. For those of you that are looking for that special someone, a gift for that special someone, I should say, check out Quest Jewelers at questjewelers.com. Give them a call. They have a wide variety of things there for you and can special make beautiful pieces. So give them a call and check them out. I also want to thank Nationwide IT Services. NIS is a service disabled veteran-owned small business owned by retired Army Warrant Officer C.K. Park. And CK and his company of fine employees are stationed in around 30 states around the United States. And he employs a large number of veterans with the company as well. And they are there to help you for whatever your business needs may be, whether it's IT, security, performance management, measurement, studies, 360-degree assessments, whatever you need help with your business. CK and his folks have the people who can help you. So I encourage you to give them a call there, look them up on the website, and they'll be more than happy to talk with you. All right, so let's talk about our show tonight, and I want to get into our guests this evening. Felicia Pecora, and Felicia is sitting down in Tampa, Florida. And Felicia, interesting enough, she spent about 8 years in the Army Reserves and finished her time as an Army sergeant. And we're going to talk to her a little bit about that. And then went on to a second career in law enforcement, primarily, I think, Felicia, correct me if I'm wrong, but around the Tampa area and the Tampa Police Department.
Yes, sir.
And she has interestingly enough, very similar to myself, she has a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, and went on to get a master's degree in public administration to complete her career development, or at least continue to develop it. She's been the recipient of a number of awards, including the Chief's Leadership Award and the Florida Bar Law Enforcement Officer of the Year, just to name a couple. So we are so happy to have you on the show tonight, Felicia. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, so you've done one of the things that a lot of our military folks go on to do. They kind of start off a career or time in the military, and then it tends to feed right into the law enforcement careers. I told you I had my bachelor's degree in criminal justice as well. And of course, by the time I retired from the Army, I was already in my early 40s and had a bum knee. So that kind of killed that for me, but it was something that I was actually interested in, earlier in my life as well, was, the law enforcement career. So my hat's off to you for going into that. But I want to spend a little bit of time first talking with you about your experience with the military. So how did you come to go into the military? What happened there?
Well, I have 5 brothers and 2 sisters. So I was a pretty timid, a big Italian family, and I was, believe it or not, very timid, soft-spoken, just would go along to get along, and I had 0 direction, but I was wild, had a lot of energy, and, idle hands are the devil's plaything. So I thought I was getting in trouble and all this other kind of stuff, fighting. So somebody had talked to me about the military, and my grandfather was in World War II in the Navy.
Okay.
So I'd always thought, well, maybe I'll do something like that. I finally went in. I put it off because my friends made fun of me. It was back then when I was 17 trying to go in. So I put it off. And finally, at 22 years old, I joined the Army Reserves. And I'll tell you, the Army saved my life because it's the first time anybody said that I was a leader at anything. By the end of basic training, my drill sergeants made me the platoon guide.
Yeah.
And that was like, no one had ever said that I could do that. And they created an environment where it came out naturally. They were able to kind of pull it out for me. So the Army changed everything for me. I'd probably be in prison if it wasn't for the Army.
Well, you know what? I did have one guest on here a while back that went to Vietnam, and he was basically given the choice between joining the Army and going to jail. And that was during the Vietnam era.
Right.
And it made a big difference in his life as well. So,
Yep.
I'm not surprised at all. So you spent about 8 years. I understand that you spent some time in Bosnia as well.
Yes, I deployed to Haiti in 1995, and that was the hottest place on earth, but I had a great tan.
Yeah.
And then I went to Bosnia in 1998, and that was the coldest place on earth. I never knew that humans could live in single-degree temperatures because I'm from Florida.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was Bosnia. I was actually a buck sergeant, and it was my first deployment as a sergeant. And man, I learned so much. And we were a company joined. We took our platoon. I was a machine gunner in a postal unit, if that tells you anything about me. And so our company joined with a company from Minnesota and a company from Arkansas, and we became a giant postal company.
Yeah.
So we went all around. We were in the tiny little one-man postal centers around, like the tiny little camps, and then we had a big postal center right in the middle of Tuzla.
Yeah.
So I got a chance to go. I was kind of like a fixer, and so before the postal inspectors would come, I'd go to each little satellite place so people could go on vacation, and then I would fix the stuff at the mail in their little mail things. So it was great. It was a very good experience for me, for sure.
Yeah, I noticed you said you never realized people could live in a place so cold. I tell you, I said the same thing the first time I went to Korea.
Korea's cold too. We used to go there for our 2-week vacation.
Gosh, yeah, it's. I have to say, in all honesty, between Korea and Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, were probably two of the coldest places I had ever been. And I spent quite a few years in Europe as well during my Army career. So, oh my gosh, yeah, it's kind of funny how you do that once you join and you travel all over. You learn so much, and it sounds to me like the military did very much the same thing for you that it's done for so many people. Is it taught you so much, and it opened the world to you and helped you develop into partially of what you are to now, I assume.
Oh, completely. I actually got into training adults doing our basic combat skills at my reserve unit. And that was the first time I ever got into teaching. So it was like 1994. And throughout the military, I did, task related stuff like there's how to handle mail and stuff like that. But then when I joined the police department, about 2 years in, I was teaching at the police academy. And so since 1994 until today, I've been teaching adults, and it all started with the military.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I have to say, you and I have some similar career paths, because my military career, I began teaching as an adjunct professor for Central Texas College while I was in Europe. And then once I moved from Europe, my last time here to Northern Virginia, I picked up on my adjunct career and spent the next 20 years teaching as an adjunct, and it all started when I was trained as a military instructor while I was in the military. So, it seems to open so many doors, as it sounds like it's done in your case. So you finished your time in the Army, and So how did you get into law enforcement? I mean, I know you got your bachelor's degree, but how did you get into that?
Well, so the military gave me the discipline to finish college. And so the one of the reasons I went in was to for the GI Bill because,
Yeah.
yet another broke college age, kid. So my family hated the police. My dad hated the police. My uh, most of my brothers have been arrested. Like we just weren't we didn't ever call the police when something. I had no idea the police did as much as they do.
Yeah.
Um, I graduated from Florida A&M University. Go Rattlers. Um, in 1998 with a bachelor's, and then I got hired by the U.S. Marshal Service.
Oh,
And I was all excited and getting ready to, they have like their own live-in academy, but then they
yeah.
had a hiring freeze. And so they're like, well, just hold off. And when the hiring freeze is over, we'll start the academies up again.
Yeah.
So I went to this martial arts place to keep my, fitness up and keep my skills up. And the guy that ran that was a former master chief for SEAL Team 6. And he was one of the people that was told to go to war and go to jail, and
Yeah.
that's how we ended up in Vietnam. And anyways, he was a fantastic trainer. So he told me about this thing called the Police Corps, which was a federally funded police academy. And the whole idea, the whole foundation of it was community engagement and lifting up communities and not just, random punitive arrest tickets.
Yeah.
So it was great. It was such a great experience. He was a fantastic trainer. He used to, I swear to God, he used to smoke cigars, eat onions before we did our defensive tactics so
Oh
that he
my
smelled
gosh.
rotten when we fought him.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So from there, I I remember when I first went into the field training program as a rookie, I couldn't believe that they paid me to do that job. I would have paid them. It was so exciting and so challenging. And my field training officers were like amazing. I couldn't believe how I thought it was just going to be traffic and boring stuff like that. And I was just going to bide my time until the Marshal Service,
Yeah.
their hiring freeze was over. From like the day one, I couldn't believe how lucky I was to be a police officer. The last thing my family or anybody that knew me ever would have expected from me.
Well, I think it's interesting because I know you've had a number of course, assignments and positions while you were in law enforcement. And one of them I thought was interesting was you spent some time as a bomb technician.
Yes, that was my dream. And you know, I when I first joined the military, I wanted some kind of kick butt job, but in the 90s, not every position was available to females.
Yeah.
So I went with the one with the highest bonus for just signing
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
So that was postal. um, but in the police department, yeah, the years I was a bomb tech were amazing. I got to meet so many very smart people. I worked the Republican National Convention that was in Tampa in 2012, and I got to work with a team of federal bomb techs. They were all geniuses as far as I was concerned. And I loved the work. I loved the problem solving,
Yeah.
and I like the challenge of, if this doesn't work out, it's like all or nothing.
Oh,
And that
yeah. I
really,
mean, I thought that was interesting when I saw that because, my MOS in the military that I spent most of my career in was chemical, biological, and warfare, chemical, nuclear,
yeah,
biological, chemical warfare.
yeah, you
And
burn.
one of the secondary things that we did was, we had to use explosives and set up food gas bombs and different things. So the closest I got to doing anything bomb technician related was setting up C4 and det cord and stuff, and things like that, which we thought was really cool.
Yeah,
So when I saw that you had spent time as a bomb technician, I thought, wow, I'm sure that had to be interesting.
it
So you
was,
went, oh, go
it
ahead.
was something because they didn't have a bomb suit small enough for me. It had been all men. and they're pretty tall fellows. There weren't any short guys, and so I had
Yeah.
to use a suit that weighed 100 pounds, and it was
Yeah.
a medium-sized suit. So the kneecaps for the suit were higher than where my kneecaps were. And my hands, they had to like really pull it up and wrap it tight so I could at least get to my hands. And one of the things they did for the bomb squad tryout was 3 days long. And the first thing, just about like, yeah, the first thing that we did was our physical agility course that you do as a
Yeah.
police officer in the suit.
Yeah.
And so the hardest thing I had to do was stand up after I'd been on low crawling in it, and to
Yeah.
try to get myself up without any help with this 100-pound, and I weighed about 135 pounds at the time.
Yeah.
That was hard. I felt like a baby trying to hold my head up.
Well, when I was at Fort Benning, I was chief instructor for the Chem Bio school there. And right across the little road where our school was located was the EOD detachment for there, the regional EOD detachment. So those guys used to come over into our school building frequently and sit down, and we'd have conversations. And I knew it was a pretty interesting field because they used to have some pretty interesting stories to share. So when I saw that on your resume, I thought, oh wow, she's really been busy. So I saw something else on there though that I thought was something I thought was really, really, really neat, was the fact that you had developed a program there in Tampa as a military affairs liaison officer for military personnel, I guess, recruiting or incoming military personnel to the police department?
Well, actually, it had two main functions. The first one was for our own internal police officers. We have I believe there was over 120 veterans that worked, including civilians.
Yeah.
That worked for the police department, and 65 officers were in the active reserves.
Okay.
So when they got deployed, typically we didn't have any protocol for when they came back on how to reacclimate them into the police department. So and plus there's also about 99 city of Tampa.
Yeah.
And so I realized we needed somebody to help us with the internal stuff, like you, Sarah, when people are going to drills and stuff like that, and police business interferes or the nation's business interferes. And then we needed outreach to veteran communities, not only to recruit for the police department, but there's a lot of transitioning veterans who come over from overseas, and they get into trouble because they're having some difficulty transitioning. So they're not bad people, but they do nuisance crimes.
Yeah.
Instead of falling through the cracks, like our jurisdiction here has veteran court, because sometimes it's, there might be some PTSD issues that if they're just addressed, the violent behavior stops, or, the erratic behavior or the drug use. So in coordination with that, I actually had a friend of mine who was a first sergeant at the time for an Air Force Reserves squadron on MacDill. And she's a genius at USERRA. So I'm really good at the outreach, and I had been part of several veterans organizations. She was really good at the USERRA stuff. So between the two of us, we developed kind of partnerships with area resources that we vetted and make sure they were good. We had a great relationship with the James Haley VA Hospital. So if we needed a bed, we got a bed. We always got a bed. Female homeless veterans. Most of the female homeless veterans that I dealt with, it was almost always sexual trauma that happened in basic training or overseas when they were deployed, and they never could get past it. Plus, back in the day, you didn't get an honorable discharge; you got a general discharge or a bad conduct discharge if the PTSD from the incident made you act out. So there's been so many good changes as far as that's concerned. And we were able to get veterans beds that they needed, or with resources as far as job transitioning, resume services, sexual trauma, and mental health counseling. It's been pretty good stuff. One of the veterans I actually still keep in touch with, and we're kind of friends.
No. So you finished your, yeah, so that program's still going on today now, even though you finished your career, right?
Yep, the sergeant, I believe she's a master sergeant now in the Air Force, and she's a sergeant with the police department. So I believe she's still running that.
So you finished your career there as a lieutenant.
Yes,
And
no one was more surprised than me.
well, I mean, I guess it shows all that hard work during your career. But so what I want to do though is we're going to take a short break. And when we come back from our break, I want to talk to you a little bit about, what you're doing now and some of the things that you're trying to, use your influence and your assistance with, and not only helping law enforcement officers, but veterans as well. So we're going to come back right after the break and we'll continue the conversation.
Thanks.
All right, welcome back, everyone. And you've been watching the WGSN-DB Going Solo Veterans Corner on goingsolomedia.com. And we've been talking with our guest tonight, Army veteran Felicia Pecora, and now retired law enforcement officer. And Felicia, I know that since you left, well, one thing I wanted to bring out too as well, because you were involved in so many things, but I know at one point you were also working on the board of the Tampa County Libraries as a
Yes.
volunteer for community service as well. So it seems like you've been doing so much. And I understand now that you have created the Doer Academy and
Yes.
with your new endeavor now. So why don't you share a little bit about that with us? Tell us what you're doing.
So the Doer Academy, basically we offer in-house workshops, online training, or customized training, everything to do with crisis management, risk mitigation, and violence prevention. So I like to call it the dark side of management.
Yeah.
So it's the how to deal with toxic employees, how to have those
Yeah.
the crucial conversations that you sometimes need to have, and team building through psychological safety And everything that we do at the foundation of it is safety. Is it safe to be here? What's your confidence in your ability to identify danger before the danger happens? Things like that. And I actually started it in 2017 because I was looking, in 2017, I had 17 years on. I was looking at my 20 in only 3 years. And
Yeah.
I knew it was going to be really hard for me to give up the identity of police officer. So I found this course on entrepreneurship, and it was through Veterans Florida. It was a grant funded, so it was free. It was for
Oh,
me. And it was through our Hillsborough County or Hillsborough Community College, which has now the instructors that taught me. One has opened up a 50 nonprofit for veterans called Action Zone, and the other two took their amazing entrepreneurship program, and now it's through the National Association of Community Colleges, and it's
oh,
nationwide. So it was such a great program. The learning curve was like this for me because it was so new, but it gave me the foundation, and I learned how to, I've been a public servant for 30 years. I don't know how to ask for money, but for some reason it worked because I got clients. And actually my proudest moment as an instructor was a woman. One of my clients was the Hillsborough County Tax Collector's Office, and there was like over 250 employees. So
yeah.
we had done in-house or online training first to kind of get everybody on the same sheet of music. And then we did a workshop. Well, when we did a workshop, this woman came up and said she was a clerk for the tax collector's office by day, and by night she worked at the Greyhound station. And she told me that she stopped a shooting because a man came in with a bag, which the bag is not suspicious, but there was something not right. And she had learned about your instincts and that your
Yeah.
brain can observe a million different things subconsciously without you even knowing it. And it'll tell you when something is dangerous or not dangerous. So she told her manager, hey, something's not right about this guy. And in true management style, they blew her off.
Yeah.
So she told the safety guard, or the safety guard that was in the bus station, and he started surreptitiously moving the other passengers away from this guy. And about that time, he reaches in, pulls out a gun. He's looking for people to take hostage. There's nobody there. He's looking for someone to shoot. There's nobody there. They call the police because the other passengers had been separated from him. The police are able to take him in custody. Nobody's shot. Nobody
Yeah.
dies. She told me that story, and she said because of the online training, she never would have done that if she hadn't taken that online training. And I was like,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was amazing.
So,
So
so it makes
that's
you
what I knew
feel
I
like
had to
it's,
do.
yeah, no, it makes you feel like it was important, and what you were doing was making a difference. And,
Right.
I can understand that. So you in during this training, you train people or managers, businesses, or whoever the attendees are
Hmm.
to not only be aware of their surroundings, try to how to at least to a certain extent read people,
Right.
the
Behavior
body
cues.
signals, different things
Right.
that don't look right. Yeah, it sounds to me like it's pretty interesting. And um, so so how is it going now? I mean, you launched it, and
So I
how
dabbled in it when I was still working full time as a police officer,
yeah,
and it was, I mean, it was going well. Interestingly, one of the stories that I really talk about resilience in two different ways. The way that I talk about it as far as business goes is you can have an event that happens that absolutely shuts your business down, and if you haven't prepared, that's the whole crisis management model. If you haven't planned to have some kind of business continuity thing, you're not going to make it. It's going to be gone forever. If you
yeah,
have like COVID, look at how COVID changed everything. For me at the time, right before COVID, I took on a partner because I don't know how to sell anything. I know all I know how to do is give it away. So
yeah,
she helped me actually have people pay for stuff. And we were about to sign this guy in Collier County who wanted to buy our school safety program for every
Hmm.
single private school in Collier County. That was going to be huge. And then
Wow,
COVID happened.
yeah,
And then all the schools shut down.
yeah,
So, I at the same time, as during 2020, COVID happened. COVID kind of started in 19, and then in 20s when the George Floyd murder happened and
Yeah.
the civil unrest throughout the country. What happened in our own city here too, and so I had to make a choice. Am I going to focus on my business or the city I've been protecting for 19 years? And
Yeah.
the city won. So I put Doer Academy on the shelf. I focused on what my department needed from me. But I always kept in touch with people. And if anybody ever had a question about safety or whatever, I always answered it. I never charged them because I knew the relationships were going to matter. And if I ever wanted to get back into it, I needed those relationships. And sure
Sure.
thing, in 2021, 2021 became a little bit safer to meet and stuff like that. I kind of hung out my shingle, and immediately I was asked to create a realtor safety class
Oh.
and do all these and I was like, oh my gosh, because it was that relationship. The relationships that I
Mhm.
maintained is kind of what helped me keep dabbling in it. And then when I retired in September, thank you very much, 23 years, I decided, you know what? I'm going to invest in myself. This is something I feel, it does good for people and it gives me a mission. So I'm not just laying around loitering and, being absolutely worthless.
Yeah.
Let me continue to, this is, 30 years of experience. I don't want to die with all this stuff and take it with me. I want
Mm.
other people to know stuff that can help them feel safer. So it's been amazing on this one because I've been focused on it. And it's actually a good problem to have. I've had a waterfall of activity and I'm trying to keep up with it. So that's really
Yeah.
good. I'm blessed for
Yeah. I
that.
mean, sometimes you become a victim of your own success, and
Right? That's
it's
actually the other side of resiliency that I talk about is, sometimes we're so resilient that it ends up killing us. It ends up wiping us out, right? Because we're so resilient, we kept standing up, knocked out, stand up, knocked
yeah.
out.
Well,
We don't know when
it's
to, go sit on your chair, sit on the stool for a minute, have
well,
some water.
it's funny you should mention that resiliency, because I know that you, as a police officer, have experienced some of the things that a lot of our veteran audience have experienced, and your own battle with PTSD. And can you share a little bit of that with us, and what you did, how you
Yeah.
came through it? Because this is something that's always important for our
Right.
audience to hear.
Well, interestingly, in 2021, I was diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury and
Mm.
PTSD. Um, the time leading up to that, it was just, Generation X will sleep when we're dead, right?
Yeah,
We don't take
yeah.
vacations, and everything is just go, go, go. Um, I had a series of like crazy traumatic events between a man set himself on fire and a little girl getting shot, my friend using his police car to stop a wrong way driver from killing civilians behind him and giving up his own life,
Mm.
working his crash. Like it just happened one after the other after the other. My mom died. I was in a shooting and I had to shoot a man to stop him from killing his girlfriend. And unfortunately, he succumbed to the injuries. So all of this happened within like a 3-year period.
Mm.
And I had a friend that was like, you've kind of been through a lot, don't you? Maybe you should take it. And I'm like, no more than anybody else.
Mm.
So it kept building. The traumatic stress that I never took care of became traumatic stress injuries. And the traumatic stress injuries that I never took care of became the disorder. And the way it showed up, it wasn't the worst thing that ever happened to me. A little girl, a 4-year-old, got shot in the chest, and me and another officer were doing CPR, and we were surrounded by people screaming at us and kicking at us. They were so emotionally distraught that this child got shot that they were taking it out on us.
Mm.
And that I knew that was going to be rough, but the way that we know we may not sleep tonight or whatever. And I remember I was able to fall asleep and I did think of her as a memory. Well, a year later, actually, I met or re-met a relative of hers who went nutsy on me and started screaming at me and in front of a crowd of about 100, because we were at this event for stopping shooting. Stop the
Yeah.
Shoot is what it was called, and it was for the Black community, telling the Black community to stop using guns, because everybody they brought to speak, they had lost their children to gun violence. So in front of all these people, she just went crazy on me, and everybody turned, and I was just like I did for the previous 20 years, stuffed down that the way that I was feeling, and was just calmly like, no, ma'am, I tried to save your daughter and
Yeah.
I tried to get you to the hospital. And that's all I could say. But when I walked away, the sides of my head were like, and
Mhm.
I felt lost, which is, I've never felt lost on duty, because I was always, this is what we're going to do. I got a plan for that. And I never felt lost on
Yeah.
duty. So when I went home that night and went to go to sleep, it wasn't that I had the memory of her. She was there. The smell of the street was there. The
Mm.
blue and white lights, blue and red lights were going. And I could feel the wetness on my knee from the blood, that because I was kneeling. It's so crazy, because I was absolutely there, and she didn't leave me for 3 months. The way that I was able to get through that was, I was so paranoid that I was going to get fired, as you do, that I got a psychologist through my own insurance, and she did EMDR, which I might not even be alive if it hadn't been for EMDR,
Yeah.
because that is the only way I could handle the fight or flight. My fight or flight was triggered whenever I saw small children with small little chests. I would see that bullet hole
Mhm.
in their chest, and they would appear dead to me. So I lost all my, the way it worked for me is it felt like a vacuum tube shoved into my lungs, all of the air sucked out of me. And when they lasted about 30 minutes. And so I thought I was going to die. And I became paranoid and all this other kind of stuff. And when I started the EMDR, it was brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal. But it's the only thing that worked, because I remember the day I was able to go and I saw some kids that were small, and I was like waiting for and it didn't happen. And I was like, hallelujah. It was
Yeah.
amazing. And while I was doing that, the traumatic brain injury I'd been in crashes. Police officers, we were always in crashes. But I'd also been hit in the head with a metal pipe, and
Mhm.
I'd fallen off of a 20-foot obstacle twice, because I'm very klutzy. So I had hit my head several times, but also the traumatic stress when you're in an incident, the chemicals that your body pushes out to save your life, to get you into the state you need to be to like run from the saber-toothed tiger, it stays with you. There's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score, and it explains the chemicals don't go. And the cortisone, the stress hormones, if you're not able to alleviate all of that stress, and most police officers are living in a state of hypervigilance if they don't know how to manage their stress,
Yeah.
it just adds. And so the way that it showed up on me was brain damage in my occipital lobe. My brain was actually swollen, and within 2 weeks of the woman yelling at me, I had lost my ability to speak. I had this lag that it would have taken me half an hour to introduce myself. I lost my ability to read. When I would look at words, the letters were like symbols and I couldn't understand it. And then my memory would only last a couple of minutes. So to go from that to the way I am now, it took hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And that was a godsend, because that healed my brain, at least got it down to where I could start to remember things. And ice baths, I had no idea the way that they helped me physically. When you get yourself submerged up to your vagus nerve in an ice bath, your body has these proteins. It pushes out all these toxins. It helps, everything, your skin,
Yeah.
helps your organs, everything, in addition to the oxygen. But cognitively, the whole thing was, when you breathe through your nose, it's fight or flight, right? or excuse me, when you breathe through your mouth, that's fight or flight. So like you're cold and you're like, that's all fight or flight. But when you breathe through your nose, like we've been doing in this conversation, we're in control. So the whole objective was to get in all the way up to your vagus nerve, which controls fight or flight, in 32-degree water, and breathe through your nose. So initially, like it took me like a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes of trying to calm down and breathe through my nose. And then I was able to get up to staying in the water for 7 minutes without ever having to breathe through my mouth. That took my fight or flight, the PTSD when I was triggered, it took it from 30 minutes, which I know I couldn't have lived through, because I was having suicidal thoughts because I felt like I had no air for 30 minutes, and it got it down to about 5 minutes. And then I thought I could live with that.
So in essence, all the therapy and the help you got helped save your life.
Yes. And ironically, I was one of the lead instructors for officer wellness before the bottom dropped out for me. And because by the grace of God, I'd done a lot of research in PTSD and stuff, but I had a clinical understanding of it. It wasn't, I don't think I truly understood it. I could say the things, if you do this, this will happen, but I didn't really understand it until I went through all of this. And I can tell you, the last 3 years, I've probably learned more about myself, and I've learned more about relationships and what it is to be human than I have known or ever learned in the previous 50 years.
Yeah.
So it was something I feel like I don't regret it. If I could have not gone through it, that'd have been fine. I've been fine with that, Lord. However, I needed it. I needed it. I needed the bottom to fall out so I could lose all the stuff I thought I knew and gain some real knowledge and real wisdom. That it helps me now help other people, other officers and other veterans, especially to know what to look for when you're starting to spill over before you get to the point that your bottom falls out. There's signs, there's things that are going on. And who knew sleep was so important? I had no idea. Who knew taking a rest from serious, impactful things? I had no idea how important that was.
Well, I think it's important that you share that, because so much of our audience has dealt with similar things, myself included. But I want to thank you for that. But before we wrap up, I also want to just ask you one more question. If you had one final thought to share with our audience, what would it be?
Well, I'll tell you, in the middle of all that, I didn't know what to do because I was out of control and I'd never been not able to control my work life. And I remembered a video that I'd seen when I was preparing those officer wellness classes. It was a veteran telling other veterans he had recovered from his PTSD and his suicidal thoughts. And he was saying, if you're never going to make it through, you're never going to live through it if you don't have a mission. Yeah. So I made my mission. I've got to go back. I've got to find a way to get back and prove it can be done. And so I was able to, after 7 months with no duty, I was able to go back and eventually get into a uniform. And I retired full duty in uniform as a lieutenant. So my big message is you have to have a mission in every chapter of your life. You have to have a mission because it's the thing that keeps those distractions away. Yeah. And then your experiences, good or bad, they all have a purpose because you get to the mission in the end.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. And, with your experience in your career and the things you're doing now with Doer, it sounds like you're still well on your way to continue on, into retirement. And I want to wish you all the luck. And I want to say thank you so much for spending some time with us this evening and sharing your experience and stories with us.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed talking to you.
And for those of you out there in our audience, as you know, at the end of each show, we try to provide you information. And remember, last week we had a guest on that talked about the Vietnam Veterans Commemoration. I want to remind everyone that tomorrow is the National Vietnam Veterans Commemoration Day across the United States. You can go to the website there and take a look and see what activities are planned. in your community. I know there's a big one here in Washington, D.C. coming up tomorrow. So I encourage you to take a look at that and make sure that we reach out to not only the Vietnam veterans, but veterans such as Felicia and all the ones out in our communities who have served the country and are still trying to do things within the community. So I want to thank everyone for watching tonight. Don't forget, you'll be able to catch us here with another live show in 2 weeks. We hope to see you on the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. And from all of us here, I want to say good night.